Welcome to another episode of Alignment First. I'm jamming with Amy Young, the CEO of Redefine Possibility, and shout out to Christian Ponder at the Post for bringing us together. You and I spend a lot of time working with leaders in consulting and strategy, and you have a very specific mission in empowering women who want to do more. And I'm super curious. I have so many thoughts about this. You know, my wife is a Hall of Famer in the most literal sense, and she's a Hall of Fame mom too. Um, and her and I have had a lot of discussions around her role and identity in business and motherhood and being a wife and all the things that go into being, quote unquote, a successful woman in all of those roles. So I'm super excited to unpack so much of that with you, because it sounds like it's those overlapping identities that you help your clients manage and, dare I say, no pun intended, bring into alignment.
Yes, very true. Very true.
Hell yeah. So first and foremost, you know, being an athlete, I want to start here. You know, you played soccer at BU, Boston University, once upon a time. If you're like me, 2 good knees ago. We don't go back in years, we go back in like injury, right? Did you experience the death of identity, as I call it? You know, who am I if not a soccer player, if not an athlete? Was that a part of your journey coming into what you do now?
So what's interesting is it was actually part of my journey while I was still an athlete. I had an experience where by about junior year of college, I found myself ready for more. I loved my teammates. I still loved the sport. I was also somebody who was always fighting for a starting position, right? I was always on the roster, but it was like, you know, when you hold your breath of, is the coach going to call my name in the starting lineup? Or am I just going to pray that I get off the bench and prove myself? So it was a very roller coaster-ish situation. And overall, I had a phenomenal experience. But by, I would say, our junior year, I loved what I was studying. I was always somebody who didn't see soccer as part of my profession eventually. It was a major part of who I was. But by junior year, I was ready for more. So that itch kind of started. And I remember going through a grieving process, because I remember my dad, it was Brown University, we were playing and I got playing time, but I came off the field and I had this feeling of, I'm done. I want to be done. And I was crying in the parking lot with my dad. And he was like, you know, if you really feel this strongly, you can be done. And I sat with it. And I remember thinking and feeling, I'm done, but I'm not done with my place on this team yet. So as you know, when you play at a high level, or anybody that's been part of team athletics, your team is also part of that identity. They were my friendships, right? They were my roommates. So I kind of experienced this death of my drive before I even experienced this evolution of me being a part of something bigger and greater than myself. And I think that being a part of the story of the BU women's soccer team and everything, it still hasn't left me. I still go back to alumni events. So if you want to engage with it, that part of you doesn't have to, but you have to be willing and ready to let your identity evolve. And the last thing I'll say about that is it actually made things a little bit easier, because I don't think you and I have ever talked about this. I actually didn't even get to play my final games of my career. I was in the hospital. I got very sick my senior year, and I did not get to play. I was in the hospital for our conference championship and for the first round of the NCAA tournament, where we lost. So I did not even get the chance to know that my final steps on the field were going to be my final steps on the field. And what's interesting about that is, because I went through that separation process earlier, of my emotional connection, of my identity to the sport,
Yep.
it was easier for me to not feel like, I don't feel as though I was robbed. Like, I think about the athletes who lost years during COVID. I personally, because I was in a place where I was ready to evolve, I didn't have to feel that loss. So in some ways, I view that experience I had as such a gift. Because I didn't have the choice, or I didn't have that official send-off, it made my evolution easier.
Yeah, that's interesting, because, you know, when I played my last game, I knew it was my last game.
Yeah.
You know, I played 4 years straight, and when I was done, I was done. Like, it didn't crush me to turn my pads in. I left a year on the table.
Yeah.
You know, and I was ready for what's next. But it was very much it wasn't a snap decision, but I didn't question it when it showed up either. So I'm curious with that liminal space in between the emotional separation and then the last game that you didn't know was your last game. What's the mentality of being a productive role player with that mindset?
Yeah. So such a great question, because many of us are not taught how to sit in that space, right? Especially if you are a high achiever or you're driven, and I see this with a lot of my clients, right? We are used to, if we see something we want, or we have an idea, or, you know, we go after it, we make it happen, we figure out who we need, we figure out the steps, all of that. What we're not necessarily taught to do or as adept in is sitting in the unknown, sitting in the feeling, sitting in that middle space of, I have this feeling, is it true? Does it need to be true? Right? Sitting in that discomfort of trusting yourself enough and tapping into your inner intuition enough to know that, yes, this is the right answer for me. And not because my parents are telling me this, or my teammates are telling me this, or my coach, or my spouse, or whomever, right? Everybody, all of your stakeholders, right? They all, no matter how well intentioned they are,
right,
they all have their own views because they have a stake in your game, right? But ultimately, it's your ability to maybe take some of that feedback, but sit in the messy middle of you and listen to your own intuition. That is some of the hardest possible work that we can do, because your mind's going to try and throw all sorts of stories your way.
Oh yeah.
Create all sorts of outcomes and things that you should think through. But at the end of the day, and this is what, you know, we talk about when we say making decisions with intention, or, you know, being deliberate and getting back. And part of what makes these transitions easier is when you have that inner knowing, and you only get to that when you allow yourself to sit with yourself.
Was it a conscious effort to create the skill of sitting still?
Oh gosh. And I'm still working on it. We're always a work in progress. So I had a mentor who taught me a lot about, and this is a concept most commonly assigned to Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And he has this wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about the space between. And the space between is really that we all have a stimulus. We always have triggers, right? We all have triggers. There's a stimuli, something that we react to. And that's just going to happen. That happens in our daily life every day. But what tends to happen to more unconscious people is that they go straight from stimulus trigger to reaction. It's like boom, boom, right? Somebody cuts me off in traffic, you know, I'm rolling down the window and I am giving them a piece of my mind, right?
Tell me you're from the East Coast without telling me you're from the East Coast.
Whereas somebody who is more in tune, in touch, right, has gone through some of this work, they create a space between. There is still the stimulus trigger because we can't control the person that's cutting us off. We can't control that we get fired. We can't control all of the external factors. But we create this space where instead of going straight to reaction, we create space and we have intentional response. It's like, yes, I got cut off. Wait, I feel myself going there. Okay, I'm going to take a beat. That person could have just gotten really bad news, or that person could be on their way rushing to see their parent who is in the hospital dying. I don't know, but this is what I'm choosing to sit with and therefore create a response of, I'm sending you so much love because clearly there is something going on for you, right? In that cutoff circumstance. That is something I have to actively choose every day, is to respond and not react. It is our choice. We have to be willing to take that beat, to take that space, and to know ourselves well enough to come at life via response instead of reaction. It is a practice.
I love everything about that. And at the same time, I gave very similar wisdom to a client of mine not too long ago. And their pushback was, why am I creating an excuse for this asshole?
Interesting.
And I was like, that's a fair question, right? Very ego-driven in its origin, but still a very valid question. And it forced us to come to a different solution, a different means to the same solution. In that where you're making that conscious response with a lot of empathy in your example, where we arrived, which I thought was really cool, was what good does it do? And creating that space with a question as opposed to the best of intentions, right? What good would it do if I react this way versus that?
Yes.
And creating like a decision tree, if you will. Do you feel like there's an energetic difference in those two pathways?
Maybe slightly. Where my brain was taking me, that I was so vibing with what you were saying while you were talking, is in both circumstances, I think what's at the root of both the beautiful question that you got to with your client and my being able to, send light and love
totally,
is empowerment. That in both circumstances, we have taken our power back to make the conscious choice of how we want to deal with the fact that this person just cut us off in traffic. Whereas when we sit with what your client offered to you, well, why am I going to make excuses, right, for him? Well, we're still giving him the power back.
Right.
You're still energetically handing, right, the power back over to him. So let's build a bridge where, I might be able to say light and love because I don't even want energetically, right, that to be a part of my space. A lot of clients, right, need that bridge where we're not saying what he did is okay. How can I get you to a place where you can start to shift the power back to yourself, right? Versus giving it to him. So that's what I
well, this is interesting because what I'm remembering now in that conversation, the trigger for the pushback was their perception of that guidance was, you're asking me to ignore my emotions. Are you telling, the question they asked before making the excuse was, are you asking me to pretend I'm not pissed off?
That's a really great point. I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead. No,
because this is something I talk about all the time with clients, and I have to work through myself as well, is not to gaslight myself, right? And I never ask that of clients either, right? If you're feeling ragey, feel the rage, right? If you are like, do not tell yourself, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, right? Like, no, like, yes, if you're going to get triggered, right? There's also a difference between a healthy expression, right, and an unhealthy expression. So if you are in that moment, like, you know, this is why I could never go on a reality show, right? There are times in my car where, yes, my hands are on the steering wheel and I'm, right? And then great, you let it out. And this is part of where the power comes in, right? Is like if you are someone who is triggered and needs to feel that, it's important to you to feel that. You need to feel seen, heard, and validated. Yeah, you know what? Scream into the steering wheel, right? Do the thing, but let that be your expression and move on. To what good is it doing me? To hold on to that. It's when we hold on to the emotion that the trigger represents for us, that's where the power transaction happens. Right?
Yeah.
I am all for feeling a feeling. I punch a pillow. I actually had a friend give me a punching bag that I keep in my basement for, like, if I really am holding on to something and I need to go through it, you have to get it out. Expression, right? You need to move it through the body. Dis-ease in the body. So get it out in a healthy way, scream into your arm, right? Whatever that is, but then let it go. Express it so that it doesn't stay with you.
Would you say that it's normalized now, the suppression of our emotions, that even when you give or help somebody come to that conclusion for themselves, that they've become so accustomed to stuffing it down and pretending everything's okay, and, you know, insert coping mechanism here, that when you offer them that conscious choice to express whatever it is they're feeling, they almost don't know how anymore.
Oh, it does not. They don't know how, and it doesn't feel safe. It does not feel safe for them to, especially, I'll overgeneralize a bit here, but for women often, and this is where the topic of generational trauma and like generation to generation stuff is handed down, where women often, it was not socially acceptable for women to feel anger, to be angry, right? We had to smile, we had to be pretty, we had to, right, whatever those things are, whatever those messages were that you received. So we did not feel that we were allowed to have these things. So this is where you're actually bringing me back to an important point that I wanted to raise about what we've been talking about is, you know, it's important to meet people and clients where they are, right? If you have someone who, you know, was not taught how to feel their emotions, was really not taught how to express, I might not the first session say, you need to go to a rage room and you need to start, you know, throwing plates at a wall and getting satisfaction. It might just be that you allow them to cry at the fact that they weren't allowed to feel anger, right? I know I love my parents. I think that they did the best job, just as I'm trying to do the best job with all the triggers and traumas that I have, which is like, my dad oftentimes was, are you crying? I'll give you something to cry about, you know, like, from that, you know, type of household. And it's passed down. And so it was like, no, stiff upper lip, right? You don't do that, right? You don't feel that. And so it took me a while to learn that, like, no, crying's okay. It's what you do with it afterwards, right? Where the power and the work really begins and where it happens. But so I think we're kind of living in this interesting duality of times where, because we're starting to understand more about the human nervous system and what emotion expression can do scientifically for us and in our bodies. And we're all trying to get to the root of, where does cancer come from, right? Where do all of these diseases really, truly come from? And the effect that stress has on our systems, that more of these conversations about emotion and expression are happening, but we all are still dealing with things that have been passed down from generation to generation, where no, stiff upper lip, you put it away, you put it in your pocket and you show up for work and you go. My hope is that there is a meeting coming in somewhere, because I also still feel as though, you know what? Yeah, there are some days where you have to show up and you still have to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show up and parent on days when, God, I'm falling apart, right? Or things still happen. Some of
Yeah.
us, we lose people that means the world to us,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to show up and still go to work so that we can put food on the table, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to deny that that's not a reality. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's this awakening, hopefully, but in a way where we're going to figure out how we work with it and through it and use it to our advantage so that we can still be well
Yeah.
functioning members of society. Because if all you
Mm-hmm.
do is sit and feel your feelings all day long,
Right.
then we're going to need to have a discussion 2 to 3 weeks in if you're still in this space of then what do we do with that. So it's
Right.
a journey, I think, that we're on, and
Mm-hmm.
we're in a time of duality.
What are you seeing in women in positions of leadership that is counterproductive to who they want to be for themselves?
Yeah. Love this question, because what I see from we'll say almost a certain level of leader, right? Well,
Okay.
I'm going to generalize because
Mhm.
titles mean different things at different companies, right?
Sure.
But the kind of director, VP level, like you're an executive, but you're not like that well tenured, right? And you're
Mhm.
proved yourself to the point where they've given you the big job with the responsibility and the team and all
Right.
these things. And
Mhm.
many women also at that stage of life have children or partners or aging parents or however complicated your personal life is.
Right.
What I tend to see is that there's this, discussion of, okay, great. When we talk about setting a vision then for where you want to go, let's talk about what we need to change, because oftentimes it's what got you here that is
Mhm.
not going to get you there, right?
Right.
It is, taking on all of the work. It is having to produce A+ work in everything you do. It is having to give every aspect of yourself, work on weekends, right? Still do the PTA, still do all the volunteering, say yes to all the things, right? That people responded to that got you here. But if
Mhm.
you really want this level of success, you got to learn what your values truly are, what your definition of success is, right? What you're willing to say no to, so that you
Mhm.
start having the energy
Yeah.
to create the impact that's going to get you here. Because I
Mhm.
see a lot of women still spin here because they're trying to do it all and be everything to everyone. And therefore, like, they're not really doing the things. And then that's when you wake up and you go, wait a minute, I have all these things I thought I was supposed to have. Why am I so tired and so
Yeah.
miserable all the time? This is
Mhm.
not what everybody told me it was going to be, right? This is my experience, which is how my burnout happened. And
Yeah.
that's like what led me to do what I do, because I got so curious about, like,
Mhm.
what happened? What happens?
Yeah.
Why do we feel this way? Why do we get here?
Yeah. And if I may, I'm curious, and that's why I asked you that question in the beginning, because I think this is really fundamental to the conversation. What were the impacts on your marriage as you approached that burnout?
Whew. I think that we so I'll take you on a little bit of a journey with this, which
Yeah.
is that, one of the things that I think my husband and I, what always drew us to each other, we've known each other since we were 16. We started dating at 18.
Wow.
Um, is that we both had drive. We both had big ideas for what we wanted to accomplish and who we wanted to be. And,
Mhm.
coming out of school, we both ended up finding careers that over a little bit of time that we both really liked. And that, we both achieved a lot of success where we were
Mhm.
on par financially with each other. I might have been a little bit higher at certain
Mhm.
points, but we were both kind of on that success track. And
Mhm.
we had, 2 kids. I became pregnant with my third. And I just, again, kept taking on more and more, because not only did I have this idea in my mind of what I wanted to achieve from an ego driven perspective in my career, right?
Mhm.
But also what type of mother I wanted to be and what I thought that a good mother was.
Mhm.
And a lot of those pictures were, again, generational things that had kind of been passed down, or societal expectations that I had assumed as my own subconsciously, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So when I started holding on to so much of this, right, that's when mentally it really just started to be too much baggage to carry. And it was, panic attacks at work, brain fog, like to the point where things that I could do at the drop of a hat, negotiate a contract agreement, come up with a strategy, like my mind would go blank. And it was very disarming because my brain had always functioned really well and worked really well. And so when that started to happen from a relationship perspective, I think my husband and I both experienced a period of loss of who I was. When I was able to hold on to these things. I think that, and he and I have talked about this, that he had this idea of where we were going to be financially. He had this idea of like how we were going to keep growing and kind of on parallel. And I think both of those things had to be rewritten when I finally said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And one of the reasons I made the choice I did to step back and start my coaching business was that I had a moment where I was sitting in my basement and I was folding laundry. It was like 9 o'clock at night. 2 of my 3 kids still weren't asleep. And I'm going to date myself here, but my BlackBerry was buzzing incessantly, right?
The good old days,
right? That red light of death that would just like go when you got a new message. And I had it down while I was folding laundry. And at the time I was working alongside APAC. And so they were just coming online, right, as I was, and I just started crying. I was like, I cannot do this anymore, because I had this clear image in my mind that if I kept down this path, if I just kept trying to push, I was going to be highly depressed. I'd had a history of depression when I was a younger teenager, so I knew what that looked like and felt like. I did not want to go back there. And I was probably going to be divorced. Because I kept putting my career first and like, how could I keep doing this? So both of those things stopped me in my tracks, and my body literally stopped me in my tracks because I started not being able to function.
Yeah.
So we had to rewrite our identities. We had to rewrite how we played off of each other, right? Then all of a sudden, when I started my company, he was the breadwinner. Right? And how did he deal with that? And how did it affect that? So we also had to deal with kind of rewriting our relationship and our identities as we've gone through that. And I'm not going to say that was easy, right? Because at face value, you can say, oh yes, honey, start your company. And yes, it'll be a lifestyle change, but we're going to make it work, right? And then, 8 months to a year in, the revenue's not what you think it's going to be. And you're sitting there going, okay, how do I have kids without, without World War III, right? So these are things that you have to consciously communicate and talk over and be open and honest about what's important to you and what you need and what your feelings are, because it's a really, really just vulnerable time for both of you, as anybody who goes through change in their life. When you are with a partner, change is uncomfortable, and everybody's entitled to react to that in whatever way, and we often do, based upon our triggers and things that happened to us when we were growing up. And it takes a strong relationship to be able to hold space for someone while still holding space for yourself while you're going through that transition. And it's not comfortable, and it's not always easy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to celebrate you and your husband for being willing to stay in the pocket to manage that, because it's a lot. And I think what makes it, at least in my experience, Nicole and I, it's the unknown unknowns, right? It's interesting because, like, in our lived experience, we are 11 years into our marriage, and we are not the same people at year 11 that we were when we were dating.
Yeah.
Right. And, in our parallel growth journeys, very, very similar to yours, it's never been the expectation that we grow at the same rate. It's been a lot of this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been in different verticals, in next level speak. We play in the sandboxes of health, wealth, relationships, and time. And in different seasons of our relationship, her and I are putting more effort into those boxes than the other. Right. But the expectation has always been like, just be growing. Right. But I'm curious your thoughts here from the female perspective, because we are in a generation where I'm having a lot of conversations with single women our age who haven't found their person yet. And my wife is D1 and as ambitious as they come. And one of the agreements that has stood the test of time through all of that evolution is our commitment to prioritize celebration over competition.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for the generation that raised us, a lot of first opportunity career women, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the message that you guys got was you had to pick one. Mm-hmm. Or one was more important than the other, and they never overlapped. Best case scenario, you figured it out enough to run them in parallel. But if you wanted to be wife and mother, like, you had to not pursue a career. Or if you pursued the career, you had to forego for a particular period of time being a great mom and wife. And where I feel like in the conversations that I'm engaged in, it sounds like the unlearning in that message is, as men, if I could generalize and mansplain for a second, we compete enough. Like the divine masculine is riddled with competition. The last thing I want to do is come home and continue to compete with my other half. Mm-hmm. I want to celebrate with her. She wants to celebrate with me. And I think this is very much a byproduct of my own work and my own journey to bring that conversation to the forefront consciously. Mm-hmm. And just put it out there. Right. I'm curious, like, for your lived experience, everything that you've gone through with your husband and the work that you do now, is that just a story that I'm creating based on what I'm seeing and hearing, or is that a legitimate dynamic that is at play here?
I absolutely see it as a legitimate dynamic. And there are a couple of things I want to touch on from what you said. And one is, it's really important to be aware of when you feel like you're in competition, or when you're starting to trend towards competition with your spouse or partner. And if, I would say there's often a feeling at the root of competition. And so for me in my journey, it's been resentment. Anytime I have felt resentful towards my husband, and we joke about this because the way it still happens now is, he travels a lot for work, and my oldest son calls it his business vacations, because, he has a lot of clients in Los Angeles. He has a client in London. So he'll just tell me, I have a trip in 2 weeks, and he'll be able to just get on the plane and go. Meanwhile, when I was in a job that had a tremendous amount of travel, if I said I have to get on a plane in 2 weeks, that meant that part of my time was spent organizing carpools and pickups and childcare and all the things. And that is very real for a lot of women who are both hats. And there was a long period of time where I would joke about it, but I resented that. Why can't I just be like, bye, peace out, And so I had to get really good at honoring and recognizing that resentment, and then to be able to verbalize that to him. Because one of the worst things and one of the most poisonous things for our relationship was when I wasn't verbalizing it in a healthy way, because it would come out as snide side comments, right? It would come out as like me humping around the house whenever, like, or, or giving him a hard time when he would tell me that he had to go. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I want him to be as successful as he wants to be. And travel is a big part of that. And we get a lot of benefits from his travel. We have so many points from him traveling and hotel miles that we're now using for all of our lacrosse tournaments in Delaware, right? So there's so much to be grateful for around it, but I've had to get really adept at, because again, when you're driving, right, when you have these goals, and maybe because of family or again, aging parents, pets, right, whatever those dynamics are, you can't get them as easily as you want to. There are more roadblocks. It's really, really easy for that poison to start coming up. And if you don't have a healthy space or place to verbalize it in a non-victimized way, that just sits and eats. And that's where a lot of relationships, I see at least, start to erode. And then when it comes to your points about having one or the other, it's an important conversation, because I was raised by a mother who hated the fact that there were certain sports she couldn't play, who hated the fact that her brothers could do things that she wasn't allowed to do. She was forced to do chores while her brothers were allowed to go back, in the backyard and practice their sport. She was a competitive person. So the way I have two older brothers, and the way that she raised me was very much, well, I don't want to ask Amy to do anything that I wouldn't ask her brothers to do, and vice versa. And she's always shared with me that, she's a little jealous that, I got to play soccer because soccer wasn't an option for her, right? My daughter now is really into ice hockey. She's like, I think it's amazing. Like, that was never an option, right, for us. I would have loved to have played. She's like, I was only allowed field hockey or tennis, right, or track. I think those were like options at the time that she had. So she very much raised me in an environment of, you should do whatever it is that you want to do, like rah, rah, right, that. I even had this Barbie board game called like We Girls Can Do Anything. And it was, Barbie's this and that, all these things. And I got to a point in my career where I was like, yeah, you know what? That's great. But you also didn't tell me that then I was going to have to do everything, right? Yes, I can do anything, but we're still living in this period where then that means that to do everything, I have to do everything, right? And that was where I felt like we need to be having more conversations about this, and also give women more permission to not do everything, give women more permission to want the career and the family and make it possible for them, but then also have a conversation about, how you have boundaries, and how you bring in a house manager, and how you spend your money effectively, right, for childcare. And let's have a real conversation about the childcare system, right? So that, yes, you can have both, but that doesn't mean that you need to drive yourself into the ground doing it all, because we've still operated under the assumption and putting it upon women that they need to do it all. So when I see younger women, I think they've seen so many other women like me or others who have opted out of corporate America because we were just carrying too much. And it wasn't sustainable. And so therefore, if you're going to offer me a choice between the career and the family, right? 8 out of 10, and no judgment if that wasn't your choice, but like most of us will take family at that point. And especially if we have a providing partner who is able to take that load for us. I also know many women who their choice was to stay and their partners then chose to stay at home. But there are not as many when you reach a certain level that do not have a partner or an extreme support system helping them. I know that was my experience when I was an executive at CBS. And I looked at my boss, who was the president of ad sales, and all of the other senior women in the company who I admired very, very much. Many of them had either one or no children. And there I was trying to do it with 3 at a certain point. It's valid. You start to look ahead of you and say, okay, well, how do they make it work? And you look and you go, oh, well, they don't. They don't have the same. They didn't make the same choices that I did. And so we need more examples of more women who are doing both, but then who are open and honest about how they do it all and have the systems to be able to do it all.
Yeah.
I think we see a lot of, we hear a lot of cautionary tales. And my hope is that with the next generation, like with what I'm trying to do with my daughter, right, is have open and honest conversations about how to invest, how to save money, right, how to go after a promotion, but also the fact that, you know, let's talk about how you're going to spend your income eventually so that you have support systems. Hey, send your laundry out, right? Get the service. Maybe you don't live in the 7-bedroom house. Maybe you live in the 4-bedroom house, but you're able to put all of your focus and attention on whatever lights you up because you have the support system that gives you energy. Let's talk about what success means for you, right?
That's the one. Yeah.
Does success mean making 800,000 to $1 million a year? Or does success mean being able to use your gifts and yes, make a good living and do whatever it is you want to do, but have the freedom to make whatever choice it is you want to make because you have the energy to create, to lead a team, to do all those things?
I think that's the missing conversation, is helping, you know, we always, you know, talk shit about our generation's high school experience and like the stress of having to have it all figured out and what you're going to do with your life at 17, 18 years old. And obviously the answer is who the fuck knows, you know? And even if you had asked me leaving the Marine Corps, if this is the work that I'd be doing, I couldn't call it. You know, like when I left the uniform, I was full head of steam for the rest of my life. I was going to make a living helping people sweat and smile in the gym. You know what I mean? And I don't do any of that anymore. But I think is particularly for women, what would be really helpful in a proactive way is defining what success looks like to you, right? And figure if you paint the utopian picture of your life circumstance and say, when I've checked all of these boxes, I've made it, right? What is the path, the trajectory in next level speak? What's the next easiest step that moves me towards that? And it is not exclusive to women, but I think is extremely helpful to women because now you get to color outside the lines.
Yes.
You get to look at your career path in a way that, you know, like I go back to my wife, Nicole, and, you know, her being a Hall of Fame mom. Okay. How do I meet that criteria and bring money into the household? Right. And there's a particular equation that solves that for her. But I don't see a lot of people who don't have Michaels and Amy's in their lives, like pointing that out. Like what is that optimal equation for you? It might not be, you know, the 47th floor corner office at a Fortune 500 that allows you to be the Hall of Fame partner. It also might.
Yeah.
But what I notice is that most people don't ask that question. And if they do, it's so much later than it should have been.
Oh, absolutely. And I would add that they don't ask it enough at different phases of their life and career. Because I can tell you that having that conversation with me at the age of 22, coming out of college, right? I want to be a television executive. Okay. And I got that. And then where the burnout started to creep in was when I had this inner knowing of, well, oh, I don't think I want this anymore. I got it.
Oh, what? Okay. I'm cutting you off on purpose because there's a parallel here. Like because I think you've done this twice in soccer. And I'm almost positive based on your energy, you know where I'm going. Like that moment in soccer prepared you for not realizing I don't want this anymore, in like a very empowering way, gave you confidence to do what's next. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So there's like an element of pattern recognition here. Like, ooh, this is a different circumstance, but like I've seen this movie before. So was it emotionally different?
It's interesting because I don't think I've ever thought about these two together. So thank you for drawing that through line for me, because they were both driven by an inner knowing, and they were both having the ability to trust that it was all going to work out in some way, shape, or form, even though I was terrified as hell. Right. And I was like, there's so much of this that feels so scary. Right. If I don't do this, if I don't listen to this, if I don't honor this, I don't like the feeling of where this is going to go. And trusting myself enough and my capability enough, even if I have no idea how it's going to work out, right, to listen to the fact that it's time for something else. It's that trust in myself that has enabled me to make these changes.
I love that. And I'm going to dive back into your marriage again. How do you and your husband manage the conversation, what we would call updating and upgrading your agreements? Like what are the signals that you're paying attention to that set off your spider sense? It's like, oh, wait a minute, we're living in an outdated agreement. That what we're doing used to work and now it's not.
Yeah. This is something that has definitely had to evolve over time, because we've definitely had instances in our relationship where we've waited way too long. And it's when all of the sudden you find yourself,
typically where the conversation ends up, right?
Right. You find yourself turning away from each other, right? Where it's like, I am so into what I am experiencing, I am feeling the pain that I am in, right? This decision, all of the things that, and both of us tend to be introverted people. So I'm going to go inward and I'm going to say everything's okay, even though they can tell that something's not okay because we've known each other for so long. It's like, but I'm not going to tell them. I'm just going to sit in my little cave, right? And it's having to get better over time in certain moments. I'm doing this because I remember being in bed at one point, right? And touching his arm and being like, what's really going on? Like, maybe you don't want to talk about it yet, but like, I know you, I know something's going on. So please tell me, right? Having those moments where you have to let them know that that there's something. Because especially when it comes to like sensing that a career change might be afoot or something else is going on, that affects everything.
Yeah.
Right. So there's having empathy that's a big decision. It's a big conversation. And maybe we don't really know how to handle it or how to couch it. Letting them know that you're open to hearing whatever it is they have to say. And we both had to get a lot better at just holding space for each other. And we talked about like that space between, the reaction and the actual response.
Yep.
But ultimately, we're a team. We're a system. We're a team. And it's, the only way that this is going to work, that doesn't mean we're not going to get frustrated and angry and mad and have to feel like all the things, right? But ultimately, it's a conscious decision to continue being a part of this team. And that means that we have to do the work at whatever it is we need to stay in this partnership. So we've both had to do work. And we've had some days where we've had to say, like, you know what? I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to talk to you about this yet. But that also means that when we are, or that we actively work towards it. We don't just say that and then walk away and then never address it.
Right.
You have to constantly be making that conscious choice to come back to each other, because otherwise, like, you end up moving to different teams, and maybe that is ultimately where a relationship ends up. But being a part of that has been that conscious choice of, are we still rowing in the same direction? Right? I kind of feel like you've been rowing over here and I've been rowing over here. So, like, are we going to start rowing back over here? Let's talk about that and, like, figure that out. Because the other thing that I'm in strong belief of is that certain relationships are meant to be in your life at certain times for different reasons. The ending of a relationship, the ending of a marriage, while it can be extremely heart-wrenching and challenging, can also be one of the most beautiful metamorphosis which I don't think is a word, but that you go through, right? Evolutions that you go through. If you let it be, if you see it as that, if you open yourself up to it being that experience. And so there are going to be some times where, whether it's friendships, relationships, right? You were rowing like this in the same direction for a long time, and then you just start going like this, and you keep going. And you have to be willing to sometimes just also let that go and recognize that, no, we're not going to start rowing back in the same direction, and this sucks. But ultimately, that's okay, because, again, I trust myself enough to know that I'm going to figure this out.
For you, is that conversation, does that still require an act of bravery?
Yes.
Or is it an expectation in your relationship? Like, this is an agreement that we're making, that when you're feeling some kind of way, it is my expectation of you that we acknowledge it. We don't have to attack it right here, right now, but we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Or, so expectations versus, like, just straight up courage.
I would love to say that it's expectation, because at a certain point, like, you should respect my feeling is you should respect your partner enough to be able to have these conversations, to be willing to bring it to the table. Like, that is part of my own definition of being in a loving relationship, right, with somebody, is that level of mutual respect, that I care about you enough to tell you, right, when something is. That being said, because we are all dealing with our own stuff all the time, right, it will take acts of bravery and moments of courage to say, hey, are we okay? Say, like, hey, it feels like you've been really, really distant. Is something going on? Right? You have to be willing to use your voice in that way to continue to figure these things out and find those things out. So I think it's a healthy combination of both. And especially, like, if you have a partner, like my partner, he's wonderful, but he also didn't grow up in an environment where expressing his emotions and feeling his feelings was something that was accepted or done. So for him, like, his communication style that he grew up with is a little bit different than mine. My mother was very much into personal development and, always being better and using your voice, right, and all these things. So I come from a place where it was more acceptable for me to say, like, here's how I'm feeling. Right? Versus him, it's like, no, we just stuff that all inside and lock it in the lockbox, and we don't talk about it. And we say it, we drink too much on a Saturday night, right? And then it all goes away magically, right?
Yeah.
So your partner to know whether you need to be the brave one more often than not, and be okay with that. Or if you're in a relationship with somebody who maybe is more comfortable, and there is that back and forth without you having to ask for it.
I think what you're bringing up is something I literally just brought this to a client's consciousness this week. And what you're doing such a beautiful job explaining is why mind reading doesn't work. Because for example, you and I, the truth is, you and I, right here, right now, are in this conversation, this back and forth. And what most don't realize is that for as good a time as I think we're having right here, right now, we are having two totally different experiences of this conversation. And where it's really important, and where I think it falls apart when you're not updating and upgrading these agreements with whoever, most importantly yourself,
Yes.
is you run the risk of creating a story that your experience is the same as my experience. And I don't care how you slice it, that will never be the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
What shows up for you when I set the table that way?
It goes back to fundamentally, as human beings, why society has continued to exist over hundreds and thousands of years, right? Is that if we were not self-driven, if we were not self-focused, right, humanity probably would have died out ages ago. It's these, what, as I've gone deeper into neuroscience and all of these aspects of how human beings, how we're made and how we think, there's so many things about us and about the way our brains work that have not really truly evolved all of that much since caveman days, right? We still have fight or flight, freeze, fawn, right? And it goes back to, is there a saber-toothed tiger that's going to jump out as soon as I leave the cave? So it's all about self-preservation. So your brain's job is to make sure that you wake up every day and you are breathing, right? If you do that, it's like high five, right? So any change, anything that's different than the way that you're currently operating, your brain sees as a threat is going to actively try and shut it down. So just in the context of what you just said, it makes me think about, like, yeah, we are all fundamentally wired to be selfish. We are all fundamentally wired to look after ourselves. So of course, we're just focused on our experience and being in a victim mindset of how this affects me and like, what will this mean for me, right? It's a conscious effort to think about others. 100% a conscious effort to think about others. It's not the way that we're built. So yeah, it's every day having to make that choice to have the conversation or not to, and then what that means.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool that your mom was hip to this game. And it sounds like she embodied the work, right? Beyond telling you that it's okay. Like it seems like there was like, she exemplified it too. She like lived it, right? Whereas I got really lucky after I got kicked out of school and I was, licking my wounds and trying to figure out how to get back on my feet. I accepted an invitation into a workshop that was like, that introduced me to myself, and I start to peel back the layers of what it is that Michael really wants from this experience called life, and building, the great part about rock bottom and losing it all is you get to build it from scratch.
Yeah.
And like build it in a way that is truly of your own making and not on the foundation of other people's expectations and stuff like that. Now, if I had to choose, I'd much rather have done it your way. Like, oh, this is cool. All right. And, but still it's either which way, it requires a very conscious decision of ownership in terms of how you want to experience your life. And I think what's so cool about the work you're doing is you're helping people take ownership of that power and then helping them manage whatever that next easiest step is that creates that compounding interest. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, you mean I can be in flow?
Yeah.
All the time?
Yeah.
Holy shit. And so I applaud you and your mission and the servant leadership that you're bringing forth to women who want it all, but if they're not careful, they will convince themselves that they can't.
Yes. And it's interesting because on your scroll, right, you have for women inspired to do more. And I just want to point out that more doesn't always mean more, right?
Oh,
More
yeah. Tell me more. Come on.
More can mean less, right? You can have more in your life by doing less. You can have more in your life by just creating other impact. So it's really born. My mission is that no other woman has to wake up like I did every day wanting to just cry at the fact that they have to go do this work, or that they don't know how they're going to get through the day, or just they're going to lament what happened to me, right? I want no other woman to experience that same level, that depth of loss that I felt in feeling like I wasn't myself, my career fell apart, right? All of these things. That's why I do the work that I do, is I think we are all way too valuable to society, to like the economy, everything, right? For women to be burning out and opting out. I do. So yes, it comes from a place of like, let's figure out what lights you up. Let's figure out what that definition of success is. Let's figure out what ultimately makes you you, and set that vision, and then give yourself permission to do the work to start to move forward towards it.
Yeah. Amy, where can everybody find you and work with you? And you have a newsletter out as well, right? Where can they find all things Amy?
Yes. So I'm available via email at amyyoung@redefinepossibility.com. I spend most of my time on Instagram and LinkedIn, so you can connect with me there. And I do have my email newsletter, and I have a digital magazine as well called Redefine Possibility, where I connect with women. So I would love to hear from anybody who, even if it's just thank you, what you said resonated. That means that I'm doing what I set out to do.
I love it. Well, you have an ally in your mission in me and my audience. So I'm so grateful for you. I really appreciate you making the time. You're one of the busiest women I know, and you're managing to do it well on every level from what I can see.
Well, thank you. I am just equally as like this with you. Like just gush forever. But no, thank you. This has been a true honor to be able to talk with you and share a little bit more about my story and hear more about yours.
Right on. You're the best. For everybody that's out there trying to be the fittest leader possible, head over to nextlevelhq.co. You can find the podcast, you can find the newsletter, and you'll have access to our leader quiz that will bring you into our leaders forum. But all of that requires integrity, courage, and ownership built on the foundation of alignment first. We'll see you next time.